A new study came out last year, and it's kind of heartbreaking to hear this, but children who have grown up in abusive families and faced a consistent level of adversity, many of them end up being massively successful and resourceful adults. And I think because there is that muscle that is built over time, what it takes to transform your body into a fit, athletic body where you are strong, fit, capable, lean. You could see muscle definition, the nutrition, the nutrition and the training that it takes for years. Focus, consistency, delayed gratification, and of course, discipline. All those things are what's required to be successful in business, in any business partnership.
What makes a man strong? Welcome back to the Rena Malik MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rena Malik, urologist and pelvic surgeon. Today, our guest is Bedros Keuilian. He is an entrepreneur coming from this country with nothing at 6 years old to now being worth $200 million. He is an entrepreneur, investor, coach, author, fitness expert, and speaker. Today, we discussed how to use adversity and resourcefulness to your benefit to become the best version of yourself. We talked about how to overcome childhood traumas that are often holding you back. We also discussed the importance of becoming physically fit and how to avoid the mistakes that most men make that ultimately ruin their lives. How can you attract the right partner or the perfect 10 for you? And we covered how to be the best father to your sons. You're going to learn so much in this episode. I truly enjoyed this conversation, and I think you will too. If you're one of the many people who either watches this or listens to this, make sure to show your support by subscribing or following the podcast. Now, we know that on order of 85% of you are not subscribed or following the podcast. And so do me a solid favor and do that right now to show your support. It's free and it really helps us a lot. Bedros, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Good to be here.
So for my audience who doesn't know you, I mean, you have really the quintessential rags to riches story, but it's so much deeper than that. Like you escaped from communism, you came to the US, very poor, and now you have a net worth of over $200 million. I mean, it is amazing, and I commend you for all the hard work. I personally my parents are immigrants, and they came with negative $1,500. They borrowed $1,500 from people, and they fortunately, just like many immigrant families, hustled really hard, saved, and were able to succeed in this country. But it is really challenging. So maybe you can share with us some of the challenges you had to overcome.
I think there's a gift that comes with adversity. My adversity just happened to be that I was an immigrant, right? Similar to what your parents experienced. And when you're an immigrant to a country, especially when I came, what year did your parents come?
1975.
So 75, 5 years later, I came in 1980. And I was 6 years old. I was the youngest in our family. And my dad, his goal was to escape communism because we lived in Armenia, the Soviet Union. My older brother was getting ready to get shipped off into the Soviet army. And my dad's philosophy was, that's not a war we're fighting. They've invaded our country, Armenia. There's no way my son's going to go to the Soviet army, and he's going to find a way for us to escape. And so we made our escape, and we came to the United States. It was an interesting thing because everything I heard up until the time we got here was, it's a country of freedom, of opportunity, of abundance. And it is absolutely all of that, even today. I know we went through a rough patch in our recent history, but even today, it's still that. However, it has to be earned and worked for, and you've got to grind, and you've got to hustle, and you've got to do the work and be patient and deal with the adversity. So in the last probably 15 years, I've come to the conclusion that adversity introduces a person to their highest self, because it is in adversity that you get to meet the most resilient version of you, the one that's going to problem solve. So for me, it was being an immigrant. And it's not like today where if I came from Armenia and I didn't speak English, I could use Google Translate to find my way around life. So in 1980, when there's not a lot of technology, you're having to live in Section 8 housing. We moved around a lot from one crappy Section 8 housing to the other. You don't speak the language. You don't understand the culture. You're living off food stamps. And so food is already scarce as it is. And of course, you have people who don't necessarily want you there. Like, I can't tell you how many times I heard my mom and dad getting yelled at. Maybe people weren't as tolerant as they are today, but they would yell at them, go back to your own effing country. Like, you're taking our jobs. And in the early 80s, the economy had already crashed. And so I could imagine unemployment's through the roof. People have lost their jobs. And here we are, foreigners to this country trying to get by. We have our own reason for being here, but the way they probably look at it, and I could empathize there. Hey, this is our country, right? Like, you're taking our jobs. At least that was a presumption. Because also my dad, he was like delivering newspaper at 2 a.m. and he's working at a gas station pumping gas. I don't think that those were the coveted jobs that these folks wanted.
Right.
But nevertheless, they need a finger to be pointing at someone. And
A scapegoat.
yeah, and a scapegoat. And so with that in mind, there was a lot of growing pains in assimilation, in learning the language, constantly moving around. I went to 3 elementary schools, 2 junior highs, and 2 high schools. Didn't have a lot of friends because every time you make friends, you move again. And so, but all those things taught me to be resilient and resourceful, because if I don't know how long we're going to be friends, because you and I are in school together, I'm going to go out of my way to build a friendship even faster.
Right.
And so that later translated into being a better entrepreneur, because I've got the gift of connection and networking and building relationships. And so what sucked for me back then, because it was hard to make friends, and then it was sad to lose those friends when you move. And then, having my dad and mom having to make decisions like, do we pay for the gas bill or the electric bill today? Because we couldn't afford it all. My dad had this saying in Armenian, he would say, we run out of money before we run out of month. And so when you run out of money before you run out of month, you have to decide where that money's going to go. And so sometimes you decide, I'm not going to get food. We're going to use our food money once the food stamps have run out to pay our bills. And so we would go into the back of the dumpster of a grocery store, and my dad would, was the youngest of the family, so he'd lift me up into the dumpsters and I'd pull out food that was expired, but hadn't necessarily gone bad yet. And sometimes people would go, oh my gosh, you ate out of dumpsters, poor you. It's like, it was wrapped up food,
Right.
Like it wasn't like a half-eaten sandwich thrown away, right? It was
Right.
grocery stores couldn't sell it because it's expired, but we were still dumpster diving for food. But all of that, again, taught me resilience and resourcefulness. Like when you don't have the resources, get resourceful. And when your back is against the wall, you can't just shrivel up and die. You have to push back and grind and persevere.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 2 muscles, resilience and resourcefulness, that you need most as an entrepreneur. You know that, right? Little did I know that the adversity that I was dealing with as a young man, a young boy growing up, is the superpower that I developed as an adult to grow my companies, Fit Body Bootcamp, Truly Nutrition, Fuel Hunt, my software company, Fit Pro Tracker. And all of those things were a byproduct of being able to network, make friends, pull people into my organization, share my vision, get them to buy into my vision, assign leadership positions. Like I had to learn the language. People always, one of the greatest compliments Ed Milet gave me, he said, man, for someone who wasn't born here, you have such mastery of the English language. And I said, it's because I had to learn it, right? Just like I had to learn everything about the government and American history, because for me to become a citizen, I had to take that citizenship test. I'm not a born here citizen. So adversity is a massive advantage to people. And I think we live in a time today where there's so much comfort and convenience and automation and technology. You can order your food off your iPhone and it'll just show up and you can track it coming down the street. There's so much convenience and comfort that it's created complacency. Mm-hmm. And there is no more resistance and adversity to help build that resourcefulness and resilience muscles, which kind of breaks my heart. I think we need it. I think if in the absence of it, we need to create moments of adversity for ourselves, whether it's through an ice bath or, hey, I'm going to go do this hike, mm-hmm. or I'm going to really put myself through a workout that just beats the crap out of me, or something that challenges you physically, mentally, emotionally. You do that over time and those muscles do develop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you brought up a good point. I was actually going to ask you, like, how do we build that? For example, once you've become comfortable financially, your kids are very comfortable and they don't get that adversity, right? And my husband, like you, grew up poor and and that was his adversity. He grew up thinking, I got to get out of this and I have to do it and I got to figure out how to do it. And I think that's a big motivator for a lot of people who grow up with less. But when you are well off and your kids are comfortable and you want to make them somewhat comfortable, then you have to build that adversity in, which is, something that you have to actually make an effort to do.
Yes. Listen, no one wants to be uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we've got wonderful carpeting in this room and great lighting and temperature control. Like no one wants to put themselves in a position where you're cold or hot, or your muscles are burning and your lactic acid's building up and you're being mentally challenged and there's uncertainty. But all of those things are necessary to build those emotional and mental muscles that you can't activate. I mean, I'd like to think that people listening to this, they have some level of fitness. They work out, go on a run, go on a hike, do something, you exercise. So if we're going to work on our physical muscles, why not work on those mental and emotional muscles that are needed in times of adversity?
Right. And then you said you were resourceful. You would go to the dumpster and find wrapped food that was just not really expired, but expired out with the date. And that's also just looking at things like there's nothing that's too small, right? And I think that when you grow up with that mindset that I can do anything to get ahead, that serves you really well as an entrepreneur.
It really does, because you learn to problem solve. I have a lot of clients who I coach who have businesses that are doing, let's say, anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 a month, and they're looking to scale it to millions. I let them know that FIO, figure it out, is a muscle that can be developed. The ability to figure it out and problem solve, in addition to resourcefulness and resiliency, are mandatory for an entrepreneur who needs to figure things out and problem solve when the answer isn't at your fingertips. You might have to go and buy that knowledge from an expert. You might have to do a lot of searching on Google. You might have to ask questions, go to seminars, workshops, whatever. But you've got to figure it out, and you've got to figure it out in a finite amount of time, in a short amount of time, when the opportunity is still there and the door is open for you to walk through. Because yet another muscle, indecision or lack of making a good decision. When we're indecisive as an entrepreneur, you might lose the opportunity. And now there's an opportunity cost to that lost opportunity as well. And so there's so many muscles that we can develop through hardship and putting ourselves into discomfort, but it's not something that we look for. Like, my kids love comfort. It's factor installed in us to seek out comfort. I imagine the cavemen that were cold, they're wet, and they find two rocks and they hit it together. It sparks up and creates fire. And gosh, this feels good. We're warm, we're dry, we're safe. But it took a lot of effort to start that fire, and they had to deal with the adversity to feel this internal need to figure out how to solve that problem. And when we create wealth, I think we owe it to our kids to then pass adversity down to them, structured adversity that is consistent. And in fact, a new study came out last year, and it's kind of heartbreaking to hear this, but children who have grown up in abusive families and faced a consistent level of adversity, many of them end up being massively successful and resourceful adults. And I think because there is that muscle that is built over time. And so I think I've always instinctively known that, and I've always kind of pushed my kids to a state of adversity because, look, they grew up flying first class and staying at 5-star resorts and hotels, et cetera. And I certainly don't want them to think that that is what life is,
Right. You brought up abuse. You had your own experiences with abuse. And I think that the hardest part about men undergoing abuse, especially kids, is that it's underreported. And it's really difficult. Men are not taught how to talk about their feelings. They're not really taught how to deal with those emotions. And so oftentimes that leads to them just carrying those traumas with them throughout their life, which then limits them in many ways. So how did you sort of navigate through that yourself? And what advice do you have for people?
You are not wrong. I think we are taught, and I don't even think we're directly taught, like, hey, if something happens to you, shut up about it. No one ever told me that. I think culturally we're taught that you need to keep a stiff upper lip. You need to just keep pushing through. And I think there's some good to that. There's benefit to that. I mean, at the end of the day, think about who we sent to battle, young, able-bodied men. And when they are in battle, I've got a lot of great friends who are war fighters, Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, Marine Recon. God bless them. If it wasn't for them to be able to take a beating and keep on going, we wouldn't be this great nation that we are. However, those beatings, metaphorically, whether as a child of abuse is physical, mental, or in my case, it was sexual abuse, do leave scars on you. And then those scars end up showing up in relationships, in business partnerships, in friendships, in how you interact with your kids, in how safe you feel. And I remember reading a book, The Body Keeps the Score, great book. I'm sure you've read it. And then he talks about whether you've been physically, mentally, sexually abused, that part of the brain that lights up in a CAT scan is that fight or flight area of the brain. And so if you're always operating out of a state of fight or flight, you're always fists up metaphorically as a man because you don't feel safe to talk about it. You feel like I'd be considered a weakling if I talk about the abuse and how it made me feel and how I'm scared and how I feel broken, shameful, unlovable. First time I talked about that with my therapist, I was just literally sitting on his couch and uncontrollably sobbing and using words like, I feel shame. I feel broken. I feel unlovable. I feel rage. I feel confusion. So for 33 years of my life, I carried the weight of that. Never shared it with anyone, ever. It showed up in every area of my life, personal and professional. I wish I can say that, I realized that was a big issue in my life and that I then went and sought out a therapist. That wasn't it. The reason I went to a therapist is because I had a panic attack, and I talk about it in my book, Man Up. I had this panic attack in 2013. So I was 38 years old. I'm 50 now. And I had never had a panic attack. I just remember thinking when this was happening to me, gosh, I think I'm having a heart attack. I'm 30. I remember what crossed my mind is I'm 38. I'm having a heart attack right now. This is how I die. And I felt so sad for Andrew and Chloe, my son and my daughter, who at the time were little puppies, 7 and 9 years old. And I remember thinking to myself, who is going to walk Andrew or Chloe down the aisle? And who is going to teach Andrew to be a modern day knight? Like, that's my duty. And I accepted death so quickly for some reason. And what I felt was during this panic attack, I felt my heart racing. I broke out in a sweat. I couldn't catch my breath. Both arms were tingling and I had tunnel vision. Some reason my brain made that into you're having a heart attack. Mm-hmm. And all I remember thinking was, I need to somehow get out of this room. I was upstairs in my guest house. So I stumbled down the staircase, and I don't know if it was the fresh air. I don't know if it was just a movement, but my theory was that at least if my family finds me on the pool deck, they can find me sooner than if at the end of the day, Dad never came home, and then, oh my gosh, there he is, bloated and dead in the guest house. That's literally what's running through my mind. It's morbid, but I accepted death so quickly. I felt sadness for Andrew and Chloe, and I knew that I needed them to find my body in the least horrific state. And so all of a sudden, those feelings wash away, and I go, man, I think I just dodged a heart attack. So that led me to going to the doctor the next day. He did an EKG test, stress test. I said, your heart's fine. Are you stressed? Yes, I am. I'm trying to build this business, Fit Body Boot Camp. And people just hear the $200 million. So what they don't know is to build that $200 million empire was a decade and a half of bleeding, of uncertainty, of failures, of debt, of refinancing the house as many times as you can, right? Maxing out credit cards. I said, yeah, man, I'm stressed. He goes, well, this was probably a panic attack. You're probably going to have more if you don't change your current lifestyle of stress. What I can do is put you on Xanax. I'm like, fantastic, because I can't change my current lifestyle. I have to keep grinding and working. I got bills to pay. I got a company to build. 4 days into Xanax, I remember sitting on my couch at home, feeling unmotivated, unproductive, zero desire to work. I remember thinking, if this continues, this is how I go bankrupt. Like, I'm already in debt. This is how I go bankrupt. And so I called the doctor back up. I'm like, hey, man, I've been on this thing for 4 days. Good news is I don't feel any anxiety, any stress. Bad news is I have no desire to work.
Yeah.
What other drugs do you have for me was my question. And he said, well, there's no other drugs I have for you. Have you considered talk therapy? I said, oh man, that's for broken people. That's for people who have experienced mental damage. So here I was, having been sexually abused. God knows the levels of self-sabotage and self-defeating conversations and how broken and unlovable I felt. Yet I felt like, oh, I don't need a therapist. That's for broken people, right? Because it's so easy to compartmentalize. As men, we compartmentalize, put things away, and push forward. He said, I think that's the only thing a good therapist can give you the tools to cope with your stress. So I found a good therapist. I said, how long will it take for you to give me the tools I need to cope with the stress? He says 3 to 4 weeks. So by week 4, I wasn't on Xanax. I wasn't feeling much anxiety or stress. He gave me tools to structure my life and how to manage my HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Those things will trigger a panic attack. It'll make a drug addict go back to drugs and alcoholic go back to alcohol. So he taught me a lot in those 4 sessions. And on the 4th session, as I'm signing the check or the credit card slip and saying goodbye to him, his name is Kevin Downing in Brea, California here. He goes, hey, before you leave, and I'm standing at his doorway, just like that. And I signed the check on the little clipboard or the receipt, and I'm handing it to him. And he goes, hey, before you leave, is there anything else you want to talk about? And I remember thinking to myself, no, there isn't. So I said, no, Kevin, I'm good. He goes, really? Not even your parents? Like, everyone's parents has done some level of damage to them, right? Sure. And I laughed about it. And I said, yeah, my dad would beat me and he'd backhand me and he called it the five brothers, the backhand in Armenian. He would say, you ready for the five brothers? I was like, no. And he started, beating me. And my mom would usually jump in and save me. And that was that. So I'm telling Kevin this and his eyes are turning into saucers. As I'm telling him, I go, however, Kevin, quite honestly, the beatings that my dad gave me are nothing compared to what happened to me as a kid. Why I threw that out there to him, I have no idea. In 4 weeks, looking back now, I realize in 4 weeks, that man built such a rapport with me that I felt safe. I trusted him. I was 38 years old when this conversation was happening with him. He was in his 60s. He said, wait, there's something that happened to you that was even worse than the beatings your dad gave you as a kid. And I just started crying. And so he said, can I ask you a few questions? I'm nodding my head yes, because I can't even talk anymore. I'm just crying. I'm not even making eye contact with him. In fact, his building is on the second floor. And so if I'm standing at his doorway, there's a window just like that over there. And I could see my SUV parked out there. And I'm thinking to myself, it might be easier to fling myself out the window than to muster up enough energy to actually walk down the staircase. Like, my self-preservation was just, I wanted to leave.
Right.
But I'm stuck in his door jam. And I can tell he wants to help. I feel safe, but I feel so exposed in that moment. And he said, can I ask you some questions? And I nodded my head yes. He says, were you abused? And I nodded my head yes. Well, we already talked about the physical abuse that I got from my dad, which, by the way, just for the record, I don't fault my dad. I love the man. Like, he had a rough upbringing. He comes from the communist mindset. Imagine coming to America broke with a family of 5 and you're 44, 45 years old, trying to make it. Like, the dude was already stressed and angry. Like, the last thing he needed was a kid to mouth off to him, right? And that's what I would do a lot. That doesn't justify the beatings, but we've healed. I've forgiven. I've moved on. We're good. He said, Kevin said, was it sexual abuse? And I nodded my head yes. He said, was it a babysitter? I nodded my head no. Was it a male figure? Yes. And I just mustered up enough energy to say it was 2 older boys. It was 2 older boys when I was between the ages of 4 and 6 years old when I lived in Armenia. And he just said, Bedros, I'm so sorry. And I'm just like crying, trying to figure out how can I fling myself out that window so I could be done with this conversation, get to my vehicle. So what was going to be the last and final session of working with Kevin, I ended up going another 15 months. Every Monday, I'd go on Mondays at 6 p.m. after work, after I left HQ. So for 15 months, we worked on the sexual abuse that I experienced, how it showed up in my life, the self-sabotage, the unworthiness, the shame, the confusion. The confusion was, am I gay? Did I do something to attract these 2 older boys to do this thing to me, right? The anger, the rage of, and I would tell Kevin, I'm so angry, I'm so upset. Like, why would this happen to me? He goes, look, they just targeted you, and to have someone much smarter than you who can have outside eyes tell you, look, no, you're probably not gay. And the anger is justified and the shame makes sense why you would have shame. You think like if you tell someone or they find out that you were molested, they're going to think you're gross or broken. He goes, people don't, he goes, I've had on that same couch that you're sitting on, I've had firefighters, police officers, successful businessmen just like you experience the same thing. And I got to tell you, it felt like there was this big, giant balloon that I was holding that was with all this pressure in it. And as he's telling me all this, it's just this balloon is deflating. This giant thing that loomed over my head for so many years of what will people think of me if they find out. The confusion, the rage, the shame, the anger, the frustration, all of it just over months went away. And as Kevin so eloquently says it, he says, isn't it just now like a little speed bump on your timeline of life instead of a giant mountain that you're trying to hide? Hey, no one look at this mountain behind me. Mm-hmm. And that is what healing is. We magnify it in our head, and then we assume that you're going to feel this way, and she's going to feel that way, and he's going to feel that way, and about us. And then because of that, we keep it stuffed inside. But if you're not healed, it's going to constantly show up in conversations, in negotiations, in relationships, in every area of your life. And so after those 15 months, there was so much healing that I was able to actually start talking about it on stage, on my podcast. And I think it's probably one of the greatest self-development steps that I've taken in my life was to heal from what happened to me, the sexual abuse that I experienced as a young boy.
Are you sick of going to the doctor only to have them talk at you for 15 minutes and leave without knowing exactly why they're prescribing you this certain medication and what exactly the next step is to take to optimize your health? Wouldn't it be great to finally find a doctor who actually listens to you, answers your questions, and doesn't rush you out the door? Well, at my practice, Rena Malik, MD, I aim to do just that. I specialize in taking care of patients who have issues with their sex lives, issues with their bladder, with their hormone health, or are having pain in their pelvic region or with sex. My goal is to give you the time and attention you deserve so you can leave with a clear understanding of your condition as well as our treatment plan that's optimized for your goals. During your visit, I'm 100% present with you for an entire hour. And after you leave, you can reach me. It is super easy to send me a message through our secure portal, and I'll get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. No questions asked, no hidden fees. Scheduling is easy. Just visit our website, renamalikmd.com/appointments. We see patients in both Irvine and Beverly Hills, California, and I see patients virtually in California, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, New York, New Jersey, and Virginia. Oh, and don't forget Texas. If you're outside these states, consider seeing me for an educational visit. I look forward to seeing you. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And it really is so much work. I mean, you said 15 months, but that's, and exactly how you're describing, like wanting to jump out of the window, like that is so common. Nobody wants to have the conversation. Nobody wants to talk about it. And you did it and you pushed yourself. And I think that is probably the biggest hurdle for a lot of people is finding the therapist. And you sort of did it because out of necessity, you wanted to keep going, you wanted to keep building your business. And fortunately, you got a therapist who pushed you a little further. But I think I heard you on a different podcast saying that you actually went to 2 or 3 therapists before you found Kevin.
I did.
So how did you know that those weren't the right ones for you?
I've always been pretty intuitive in terms of what's right for me. I've always seen myself as a black sheep in my family. My dad was like, hey, I'm a tailor. We got this tailor shop that I opened up and I made popular here in Anaheim, California, not too far from here. Why don't you take over this tailor shop? And he taught me how to sew, but I enjoyed sewing my own clothes. I enjoyed hemming my pants and altering my clothes. Didn't necessarily want to sit there behind a sewing machine for 12, 13 hours a day like he did. It just wasn't my thing. So I've always been in tune. I was like, Dad, I think I'm going to take my own path, but I appreciate you giving me this business like on a silver platter. So even as a young man at 16, 17, I was like, I'm going to take a pass on that. I've got my own path. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's not this. When the doctor said, hey, try talk therapy because the Xanax is all I've got for you. The first person I found was this woman, younger, probably in her early 30s. So a few years younger than me at the time. I was 38. She's probably in her early 30s. I'm guessing, I'm making assumptions here, but she had probably recently gotten her credentials. It didn't seem like she was willing to push me. And I'm a hard-headed person. I'm very pig-headed and stubborn. About 2 or 3 sessions in with her, we had yet to talk about the stresses in my life. And also, I'm very type A, tightly wound, high speed. I need results now. Yeah. I don't have months of therapy under my belt. I don't have that time or desire. I got to build an empire here, right? I'm locked on. And so I realized, man, we're 3 sessions in here. And when I talk about the hardships that I've experienced in America, not even talking about the abuse, just, hey, I want to know about your life. She would just start weeping. And so that, I felt bad for her. And so I was like, hey, maybe I shouldn't tell her like the dumpster diving, or I remember specifically telling her about, I got lice in one of the Section 8 housing complexes we lived in. My mom and dad couldn't afford lice treatment from the drugstore. So my mom had my dad siphon out gasoline from a parked car into like a glass cup. And then in Armenia, she told me, let's go out into the little grassy area of the apartment. And in Armenia, she told me, bend down, bend over, close your eyes. I'm going to wash your hair with gasoline to kill the lice. And so I'm telling this lady this, and I remember telling her, like, I felt my scalp burning, but it wasn't like on fire. It was just burning, and I could smell the gasoline. And I cracked my eye open, and I could see all these little feet around, and they were all my neighborhood friends. And I, in hindsight, I'm thinking, they probably thought like my mom's going to light me on fire or something, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, she's trying to. So I'm telling this therapist this, and she just starts weeping. She felt bad for me, which I appreciate, but
Yeah.
I need solutions, lady, right? So after 3 sessions, I was like, okay, I got to go. So then I find another guy. He's closer to my age, but again, a little too relaxed, a little too passive. And I think the lesson here for anyone listening to this, you and your therapist have to have a good personality match.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you're type A, you might want to find someone who's type A and has urgency as a therapist, because then they can relate to you better.
Right.
Right. I'm very high speed. And if they're not, it's frustrating to me. Then I begin to lose respect for them. If I lost respect to you, I'm not going to open my mouth anymore. I'm not going to talk. And so, but when I found Kevin, by the end of that first conversation, we're already talking why I'm there and my history in terms of, being an immigrant to this country, et cetera. By the second session, we're talking about my life structure and how I show up. I would come home very angry through the French doors in the house, and the whole family would scurry away from me. And I would like, can you believe that, Kevin? I worked my nuts off, and I come home and no one wants to talk to me in the house. The kids, not the wife, no one. He goes, well, and he was leaning back in his chair and he goes, you're a very big guy. And the intense look on your face is intimidating to me, Bedros. I go, well, I go to battle all day long. He goes, yeah. And you come home with your armor.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, that's interesting. This is the second session. I go, so I'm not only stressed all day, but like everyone's running away. Even the dog is running away from me. And he's laughing at me. And he goes, you're very intense and you don't realize that you come home with the armor on and no one wants to go to battle with you because they're your family. I go, so what do I do? He said, well, let's play a fun little game. Describe your property. So I go, it's a long driveway, and I come into this garage. I park the car. He goes, perfect. I go, then I walk across the pool deck and come in through the back door, 2 French doors. He goes, as you're walking across that pool deck, I want you to just picture your armor falling off of you, your sword, your chest plate, your helmet, and in walks Dad, and not a warrior who's been battling all day. All of a sudden, things changed. My kids were much more friendly to me. They started coming up to me, and I walked in with a smile on my face instead of a grimace. And so because Kevin was able to help me so quickly, there was a personality match. I stuck with him. But I think one of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself if you're going to work with a therapist is be very particular about the type of therapist you're looking for and the modality they use. What is it? Talk therapy? Is it somatic experiencing? Is it EMDR? And there's many ways to create the outcome, but there's probably a way or two that will work best for you. Having gone through all this experience now, I feel like I know what works well for me. And I think not all therapists can solve everyone's problems, in my opinion. And so that's kind of how that went down.
Yeah, and I think that's the same for your doctor, right? Like I'm a surgeon, so when a doctor wants to spend a long time or repeating things over and over again with me, I get a little frustrated. I'm like, just get to the point.
Yeah.
I don't need to be told twice.
Yeah.
And so I think, you have to find that match with your doctors, especially your primary care doctor, who's like your quarterback, who's like got your back and trying to arrange all your care. It's really important. I think you obviously also have been open about being a little bit of a chubbier kid and sort of getting through that. What was your aha moment to be like, you know what, I got to change my life. I got to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. And God bless my mom's soul. She passed away last year. But my mom could fry anything. So when we come to America and you're finding stuff in the dumpster to eat, the easiest thing to do was to dip it in eggs, then flour, and then pan fry it. And this could be anything, like from meat products to bread, and it made it tastier. And so I grew up eating lots of fat, a lot of carbs. I didn't understand macros. And I remember becoming aware of how fat I was, probably 5th or 6th grade. In junior high, I was embarrassed with how fat I was. I wore corduroys, and there were the thick lines of corduroys. And I had a pair of corduroys, and when I would walk, it would because my thighs would rub into each other. And I remember I don't want to wear this. And I had this one shirt where I looked in the mirror and I looked like a pear. My waist was wider than my shoulders. And so, 7th, 8th grade, you become interested in girls. And so, of course, I did nothing about it because I didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. I had asked my parents to put me in sports a few times, and they're like, listen, man, we're broke. Like, we're not putting you in any sports. We don't have any additional funds for that. Fair enough. So in high school, by about 11th grade in science class, one of the high school football players for Savannah High School was in science class with me, and he was my lab partner. great dude, Dave. And he was jacked and in great shape, charismatic, and we would yuck it up during science class. But I also noticed when it's just lunchtime, he's hanging out with the jocks, and I would just walk the quad the entire time. I hated lunch because I was a loner. Like the jocks would hang out together, the nerds would hang out together, the gothic kids would hang out together, and I had no group to belong to. And I just want lunch to be over with. This is embarrassing. But when I'd walk by the jocks, like I would see Dave, and I think he would see me, but there was no eye contact or acknowledgement of me. Whatever, I get it. But then in science class, we were chums. Mm-hmm. So one day in science class, 11th grade, I go, hey, Dave, I have the hots for Nikaya. And Nikaya sat up front and me and Dave sat in the back. I'm like, man, next year I'd love to ask her to the prom. And I think if I'm in better shape, like there's a higher probability she'll say yes. He goes, dude, I'll take you to the school gym afterwards. So he takes me to the school gym, the most intimidating environment ever. Young dudes, my age, except jacked and like grunting and clanging weights. And I was like, oh, geez, this is like intimidating. But I went back with him a few times, and then I got a gym membership to a Bally's Total Fitness, and we worked out together at a Bally's Total Fitness. The summer before senior year, I lost 34, 35 pounds. He taught me how to eat right. He didn't teach macros. He just said, eat higher protein, lower fat, lower carbs. And I was like, check, I could do that.
Yeah.
And so I was literally eating cans of tuna fish. That was it. That was my diet for all summer. And I was just training as hard as I could at Bally's Total Fitness. And of course, when you're a young man, you got all that testosterone coursing through your body. I came back senior year and, I looked better. I wouldn't say I looked like a Greek god, but I looked great.
Yeah.
And I guess in my mind's eye, I would hope that Nikaya would have walked up and said, hey, you should take me to the prom, but that never happened. And I didn't have the confidence to ask Nikaya to the prom. And so I never went to the prom. However, more than the physical change, I was looking for the physical change because I figured like, then she'd be like, whoa, you're hot. And I would say, then you should go to the prom with me. That's how I played it out of my head. That is not how it went. More than the physical transformation, I remember feeling confident. I remember making eye contact with people after that. I remember like being willing to start conversations. Like there was a self-esteem transformation that took place. And so when I got out of high school, I knew that my path was going to be fitness because I wanted to help other people achieve not just the physical transformation, but the mental, emotional self-worth that came with it.
Right.
That changed everything for me, everything. And so I went the path of being a personal trainer, and that kind of is what led me to creating all my companies are somehow related to health, fitness, gyms. Even the software company is like a front desk operating system for gyms.
Yeah, that's great. You always talk about sort of like how physical fitness isn't just like the physical attributes. It's so much more. And you've touched on that a little bit, like it improves confidence, it improves your sense of self-worth. But how did it sort of change your interaction with the world in terms of like finding partners, meeting people, how people responded to you when you approached them with business ideas?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this is more specific to men, but I think women could relate to what I'm about to say as well. So I guess both men and women, we judge each other, right? We judge each other in a certain way. I'm going to venture to say that women probably judge each other on what the other woman's wearing.
Potentially.
Right? Possibly. Men, we don't so much care about what you're wearing, what another man's wearing. I care about how you carry yourself.
Right.
Like there's this thing like, how do you carry yourself as a man? Because if you come in and you're hunched over, low confidence, head hanging, belly, narrow shoulders, I think it's this primal thing in us that's been there for thousands of years that says that if poop hit the fan right now, I cannot count on you to help me fight off the dragon or the bad guy or the terrorist or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so men are always judging each other and ranking each other by the first impression. And the first impression is how you look. Second, and then the next is how you carry yourself. And if how you look and how you carry yourself is a 4 and a 5, we're probably not going to do business. Or if you approach me with the best business idea on the planet, I'm just going to discount you. Whereas you could be a 9 or a 10 in terms of how you look and how you carry yourself. And you can show up with a mediocre business idea. And I can go, you know what? I'm not betting on the business idea. I'm betting on you because you'll execute. Because what it takes to transform your body into a fit, athletic body where you are strong, fit, capable, lean, you could see muscle definition, the nutrition, the nutrition and the training that it takes for years, focus, consistency, delayed gratification, and of course, discipline. All those things are what's required to be successful in business, in any business partnership. Focus, consistency, delayed gratification, discipline. And so when people go, man, that's pretty harsh that you would judge another man by how he looks. I have to remind them that how you look physically, so you have direct control in how you look. Direct. You may not be able to control the economy, the unemployment rate, the number of competitors you have in an industry. You can control how you look. And that tells me a lot about your focus, consistency, self-worth, discipline, etc. Your values. Therefore, I know whether you have what it takes or not to survive and thrive in business. The argument could be, well, look at Elon Musk. Look at Warren Buffett. Those are the needle in the haystacks. The majority of us will do better in every category of life if we are fit and as athletic as we can be, right? At 50, I certainly don't look like and don't have the strength that I did when I was a competitive power lifter in my 20s and early 30s. But I'm still a formidable force. And how I look and how another man looks, that is your credit score to another man. That's just how it is. Like it or not, politically correct or not, how a man looks and carries himself is his reputation, is his credit score with me. And how I look and carry myself is my credit score for them.
Quick break from this episode to let you know I am so grateful that you're spending part of your day with me. I started creating content online to empower people to learn more about their bodies without needing to go see a doctor, pay a copay, wait in a waiting room, or find parking. And it has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. If you want to help support our mission of providing free education, please consider joining our premium membership. There you will have access to ad-free episodes, which are released early, as well as free transcripts and the opportunity to ask me anything. And these questions are answered in our monthly AMA episodes. Support the show and join today at renamalik.supercast.com. Can't wait to see you there. I mean, obviously health benefits are tremendous, right? And I always hype on those because, the strength you build now is just going to serve you in your older years, right? And people like to think about the here and now, but when you're 90, you got to get off the toilet. You got to stand up. You got to bend over to pick up your grandkids. You got to do all these things. And if you don't put in the time now, you're going to suffer later.
You make such a good point there. And when I talk about this on my podcast and the comments start rolling in on YouTube, like, man, that sure is a shallow perspective, Bedros. I have to remind them that last year, as I held my mom's hand and rubbed her head and told her that it's okay for her to cross over, that didn't have to happen. She had dementia. She had Alzheimer's. And we know now that type 3 diabetes, right, is dementia. And for years, I mean, think of it. Her son was a personal trainer, yet I couldn't get my mom and dad to eat right. My dad fell and broke his hip last year. And he said, just leave me in this hospital. Don't come back. I'm like, dude, my kids, your grandkids love you. They want to see you. What do I mean, leave you here? We have a responsibility to our children and to our grandchildren in the future of being able to function and operate. I'm blessed that I'm financially in a place that I could afford to get a full-time, when my mom was still alive, I had a full-time Armenian-speaking caretaker that lived with my parents. And now that my mom's dead, this woman lives with my dad and takes care of him 24/7. So that myself, my brother and sister could just be there to enjoy the good times with him, right? And it's not embarrassing for him that we would have to bathe him, etc. Not everyone has that luxury of wealth to be able to do that. So I think, like, I owe it to my kids to not be hospitalized, to not, how when my daughter Chloe would look at me 3-4 years ago, so she's 16, 17 now, 3-4 years ago, she was 12, 13, 14, and Tati, my mom, Tati in Armenian means grandma, would look at Chloe's face and would turn to me and say, what's her name? And I go, hey, Chloe, Tati's asking what your name is. She goes, yeah, I know, Dad, it hurts. I go, it's because the brain's not working. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to look at Andrew and Chloe and forget their names. And then later on, my mom forgot my name. And it just breaks my heart, man, because it doesn't have to be that way. The way we should die. My good friend Dan Ritchie, who has got his PhD in geriatric training, and he's the founder and CEO of the Functional Aging Institute. He says, ideally what we want to do is we want to get old and then one day fall asleep, still be able to function the best we can and one day fall asleep and not wake up and not end up deteriorating and having things, plugs and hoses hanging out of us and our family visiting us for one hospital visit to the next. I owe it to my family. You owe it to your family, and we can do this. And so, being fit today and healthy and looking a jacked specimen of a human means that you are going to continue to be functional in the future and not a liability to your family, not a financial liability or emotional liability. And I think that's an important thing to carry.
Absolutely. 100%. And I think that's so, so important. And we think about just the here and now. And this is like the true form of delayed gratification, right? Like people wait their whole lives to retire, right? Then they retire and they're like, oh, I can't really travel because I'm not healthy enough, or I don't, I can't tolerate the travel. And, work hard, but you need to make that time. You need to make that priority to spend in the gym or spend doing physical activities. It doesn't have to be in the gym, but like some physical activity that's straining your muscles, that's straining your body to improve. And I think that, it's not sexy. People want the quick and easy, give me this pill that's going to help me lose weight, or give me this that's going to give me better brain power. But there's no shortcuts, right? There's no shortcuts. You've got to put in the work.
And going back to our first part of the conversation, the work is the adversity that you're putting in to build the mental and emotional muscles that you need anyway, right? Resiliency and resourcefulness. And so what a beautiful thing it is to be able to do the physical work. Like I could grab this cupcake, or I could grab this chicken breast. I could grab this potato, or I could grab this French fry. And that is mental toughness. That is making those right choices over time that sculpts your body, but also the adversity of going to the gym when it's cold, when it's hot, when you didn't sleep well, when no one else wants to go because it's late at night and you just didn't get after it this morning. And so you're going to have to get after it tonight, and you go and you do it. That gives you an edge in life that you cannot get from anywhere else.
And it's a promise you made to yourself, right? And fulfilling those promises to yourself is part of building that muscle, right? Because we always say, oh, I'm going to do this next, this year. This year I'm going to do this. This is going to be the year I change my life. And I think that it's just about making promises to yourself and honoring them.
So well said. In fact, that is the second most asked question that I get, which is, Bedros, how can I build my confidence? That is the second most asked question that I get. And my answer is always, when you make a promise to yourself, keep the promise to yourself, because it's your reputation with yourself. Confidence is a byproduct of making and keeping your promises, stacking all those little promises, those wins. Then over time, your subconscious mind goes, man, when he says something, he means it. He's going to follow through. So when a bigger thing comes up to do, real estate investment, business partnership, you push through, you follow through with that, because the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between I'm going to drink 8 glasses of water today, pretty trivial, versus I'm going to build a $100 million fitness franchise.
Right.
It just knows that he keeps his promises here. He'll keep that promise there.
Absolutely. And just knowing that you can do anything you set your mind to, right, is half the battle.
What a superpower, right?
Right? More than half the battle. I know I can do what I say I'm going to do, and it will get done. And that confidence comes with time. I can tell you I'm very self-assured now, but I wasn't, right? When I was younger, it took me a long time to realize that I may have no skill in something, but I can gain that skill and I can get better at it. And so if I want to do something, if I truly want that, I can get it. It will take time. It will take persistence. It will take work, but you'll get there.
Well said.
On your podcast, you've talked about things that men tend to do to ruin their lives. So what are some things that men can avoid, that they can do to optimize their life?
Good question. I think if I can list off 3 things that men do to ruin their life, and therefore doing the opposite will make their life exponentially better. Thing number 1 is probably who you choose as a spouse, right? And this goes for women too, who you choose as a partner.
Absolutely.
How about we just put that out there?
Yeah.
Who you choose as a partner is the number 1 deciding factor whether you're going to have a miserable life or a life where you are chasing your life's purpose and passion, because that person could either be the anchor or they could be the wind in your sails.
Yeah.
Male or female, doesn't matter. That's thing number 1. Thing number 2, what's specific to men, is seeking the approval of other men.
That could be the same for women.
No, good enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Seeking the approval of other men, because, I always say there's only room for one man on the pedestal. Like there's only room for one king in the kingdom. And if you've got some other guy on the pedestal, you're always looking for his approval and his validation. You know, this guy bought a Lamborghini, so you go lease a Lamborghini. This guy's got a gold chain, so you go lease a gold chain, or because these days you can lease everything. To what extent? Just because you want to be like him, etc. Right? Be your own man. Be your own man. And so I think seeking the approval of another man and seeking the validation of another man means you're living another man's dreams instead of your own.
Mm-hmm.
And what's going to happen is when you get into your twilight years, it's going to be a life of regret looking back. Like, Dan Kennedy, I'm such a big fan of Dan Kennedy, great direct response marketer and business coach. He would get on stage with 3-piece suits, custom made suits. And as I started to get bigger as an entrepreneur and get offered speaking gigs,
Mm-hmm.
I thought the right thing to do was to do what my mentor, Dan Kennedy, did, wear a 3-piece suit. And so I found a tailor in Costa Mesa, California, and had custom suits made. I get pretty nervous when I speak. I'm a introvert, yet I know, God's gifted me with the ability to orate. And so it's not lost on me that when I get on stage, even though I'm passionately speaking into the hearts and minds of the audience, I'm nervous as heck and I sweat in a 3-piece suit.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, I realized, I don't think I want to wear these suits. I had 8 custom suits made with my logo on the inside, just like Dan Kennedy's, et cetera. And I realized after spending about $40,000 on 8 custom suits, this is not what I wanted. Now I go up there in chucks and a t-shirt and a pair of jeans, and I get paid more than ever to speak. And it's because I was looking to be like Dan Kennedy instead of being the authentic version of myself, right? So again, not seeking the approval and validation of another man. And then the third thing is when a man has to look to another government or another person for money. In other words, not having enough financial resources to live a sovereign life for you and your family. Because if a man cannot produce, the modern version of hunting for a man is to earn and earn enough to not be in debt, earn enough to put yourself in a position where you do not feel financially crippled if you have to help a family member out of a jam. And I think as men, we need that responsibility. It is mastery. There was a time that mastery meant you knew how to make a bow and arrow, or you knew how to make a club because you traded that for meat and shelter. Today, it's a skill that you must have, a high income skill. It doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
You could be a salesperson. You could be a leader. The leader of my franchise, Fit Body Bootcamp, Bryce Henson, makes an obscene amount of money for being the CEO of our franchise. I'm the founder. He's the CEO. He's not the founder. I am. I had to refinance everything and max out credit cards, not him. So there are high income skills that men could have. So when I say this, like, men need to make more money than they think they need, because how do you know your mom's not going to have dementia? How do you know your dad's not going to fall off the bed and break his hip? How do you know you're not going to have to get a live-in nurse? And I wanted to make sure that my dad's grandkids did not have to see my dad or my mom in a assisted living place, but instead in their house where they're going to pass away. Just like my mom did, my dad will too. And so a man needs to make money. He needs to not seek the approval of another man, and he needs to curate, be very picky. Don't try and rescue someone in terms of a relationship. And I think, like you said, women do this. They try and fix a man, and then men try and rescue a damsel in distress. And in both cases, it doesn't work out well. Find someone who's on the same path as you. If you're fit, maybe they should be fit too. If you're ambitious, they should be ambitious. If you have other hobbies, they should have other hobbies. Because if not, when they say opposites attract, no, not always.
To your point about earning, I think that's one thing where us immigrants have a little, well, I'm not an immigrant, but my parents were, we have a little bit of a head up in the sense that, like, we learn how to save early on, and we never live above our means, because there's always that, we knew what it was like. I mean, I didn't, fortunately, but my parents knew what it was like to have nothing, and they never want to go back there. And so I think that's something that, live within your means and continue to earn, but obviously don't squalor that money that you make.
Right. Because it is so easy. I heard Grant Cardone say this one time, and I thought it was a brilliant statement. He said, there's always someone with more and bigger jets, private jets, than you.
Yep.
So if we play that game of, you got a Lambo, I'm going to get a Lambo, keeping up with the Joneses, right? That's the race to the bottom.
Right.
Because there's always someone with a nicer Lambo or more Lambos who is going to outflex you.
Right.
You're right. The immigrant edge does give us an advantage in terms of being able to save our money and not squander it.
Absolutely. And I think, finding out you should enjoy your money, but like you should enjoy it on things that you want. Right. And you see these stories of like celebrities who had net worths of 100 million, 200 million, and they have nothing because they've spent it all. And it's like boggles my mind. Like, how could you spend, like, what were you doing? Like, what did you spend it on?
One of my favorite boxers of all time, Evander Holyfield, lives in a tiny little apartment in Philadelphia. Broke. The guy was my hero growing up, made hundreds of millions of dollars. This is a great example of squandering it on things to just impress others or to get things that he didn't really need. And so when you do a life audit and you go, what truly makes me happy? Like for me, it's giving, serving others, and experiences, because those memories are something I value. Like lately, got a handful of cars. I'm like, I don't really drive all those other ones. Maybe it's time I sell them, because you get to a point where you realize, why did I acquire them? I acquired them because a status, they meant something to me. But now that I've got so much actual life experience, reputation, I think that's the status that I was looking for. And I was trying to replace it with cars and nice watches and fancy suits. And so it's funny, as I'm now 50, pushing 51, like, I don't think I want all that junk. I'm just like, that's just stuff that's getting in the way. I can make my gym bigger, because in the back of my gym, I have a private gym that I built out. I bought a building in Chino Hills, and in the back of it, I built out a multi-car garage. I'm like, I can just knock down that wall and put in some jujitsu mats and do another thing that I love and experience it with others, instead of looking through the glass and enjoying my cars that I don't drive.
And that will evolve over time. Now I want to talk about marrying the right person, or it doesn't have to be marrying, selecting the right person, right? I do agree that for women, it's so important. I tell people that is arguably the most important thing you will do in your life, is who you choose as your life partner, because they will support you or they will hinder your success. And so they say behind every powerful man is a woman. I would argue the same thing for a woman. Yep. Anyone who is successful in their life and successful and happy. I would say there are successful women who are unhappy and have a bad relationship, and probably the same for men. But successful and happy requires a really good partner.
But isn't it funny that when we say successful, we automatically attach a financial number to it?
Sure.
Successful could be rich in health, rich in happiness, rich in time freedom. I mean, to me, that's the higher variable than money. I can make more money. I can't make more time. But we have gotten so one-track minded in terms of success. I was the guy that was like, when someone said, hey, what do you want out of life? Like, I want to be successful. And I wasn't talking about health or time or experiences. I was talking about stacking a lot of money up.
Yeah.
And it's funny, as I get older, actually, man, there's so much more about success. So you're absolutely right. Like, happiness is a massive component to success.
Right. And you can't be happy if you don't have health. Mm-hmm. And you can't be happy if you don't have time freedom. So I think those are important parts of that. And I can list off my thoughts, but I think, what are some things that you think are sort of red flags for people when they're looking for a partner?
I think red flags, like I said earlier, and this is specific to men, I think men, we want to help. We want to save. This is why, you see a car accident and the dude's going to pull over and try and pull someone out of the car accident before the car blows up. We do want to save. But a big red flag is trying to save that damsel in distress, because to get them out of their current life problems means you're now inheriting those problems. Because when I look at myself, I had some pretty self-sabotaging behavior. I had limiting beliefs. One might even argue that I was a male damsel in distress back in the day. And I could have been a burden on someone. But I took the time, through a good mentor, Jim Franco, who was one of my personal training clients, and he's the one that, once he taught me how to sell and market, he also introduced me to Tony Robbins and Jay Abraham, and that's where I started to do the self-work. But as you heal, you are no longer a liability to someone. But if you stay a damsel in distress, male or female, well, okay, they saved you, but you're constantly dependent upon them constantly saving you from this self-sabotaging behavior. And at some point, and I've been that guy to also do the saving, where you realize, look, I can't just keep bailing you out and saving you and then trying to be there to be a shoulder for you. But then all of a sudden you find another reason to have a mental breakdown, an emotional breakdown, a self-sabotage, squander our money, whatever it is. And so I've been in relationships in the past, and I remember thinking, like, why do I keep going after girls like that? There is something attractive about that, because you feel like you're the knight
in shining armor,
right? but at what cost? Because there's a mental toll that it takes on you. And so I think that's a big red flag that men should look for. Another thing that men should be very particular in asking the mate that they're looking for, and this goes both ways, women, like, hey, do you want to work or do you want to stay at home and raise our kids? Those conversations don't happen. So I run this thing called The Project. We just did our 20th and final class, 5 years and 20 classes. It's a men's personal development program. It's like 75 hours long. And like sometimes men will come through and they'll go, I didn't know that my wife or my girlfriend didn't want to stay home. And I was looking for someone who was going to stay home and raise our kids. I'm like, how do you not have that conversation like within the first few weeks of meeting this person? Whether, hey, are you going to work? Do you want to stay home? Or do we want private school if we're going to have kids? I literally know a couple right now, amazing couple. They own a couple of my Fit Body Bootcamp franchise gyms. The wife, right in front of her husband, told me, I want to have kids. He doesn't want to have kids. And I was like, well, how long have you guys been married? She said 12 years. I go, so about 13 years ago, you guys couldn't have had that conversation to see if you guys, she goes, I guess we never thought about it. Those are red flags. Do you want kids? Yes or no? How many? Do you want to work or do you want to stay home? Because I might have a different set of core values.
Yeah.
Right? And if the wife's like, well, I'll stay home and raise the kids, but I also have this level of standard for living.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sir, you better meet those expectations. You can't say, well, we're going to live in a shitty little apartment and, eat McDonald's all day long. If there's a standard that she's expecting, she better say that to him. And if there's a standard that he wants, so standards, that's the other thing, right? Don't save the damsel in distress. Figure out what your standards are and ask before you step into that relationship during that boyfriend-girlfriend phase. Because otherwise what ends up happening is it's like, well, I thought we were going to have kids. Doesn't everyone who get married have kids? No, I guess no, not everyone.
Yeah.
And so that creates so much drama. I thought we were going to have kids and you're going to stay home. No, I wanted to have kids, but I don't want to be a stay-at-home. I've got a degree in this and I want to go do that.
Yeah.
They have every right to do that. But have you guys talked about it? Was that the expectation? What standards were set? And some poor communication like that, which would be the third thing, communication. They say communication is the number one reason for divorce. Money is the number two. And I think poor communication is another, because we just assume that I think I know what she wants and she assumes I think I know what he wants. And then when those assumptions aren't met, then resentment sets in, right?
I would say also your core values about finances. A lot of times when I see couples separate, it's because one has expectations of spending money in a certain way and the other one may be more frugal or more, wants to save for a rainy day. And that can be a huge stressor in relationships. And then even if you do have kids, who's going to raise them? Are they going to daycare? Are you going to have a nanny? Are you going to have your grandparents? These can be really big issues down the line that you don't think about talking about. And I think the other thing is that I would add is understanding, how important sex is to your partner. And because I think that obviously in the beginning, typically you're very into each other, you're very aroused, you're having a lot of sex, and that changes over time and over a relationship. But how do you communicate about that? How do you keep that flame alive over a long-term relationship? And understanding that your partner also finds it valuable and that you are going to put in the work in the future to maintain that flame is, I think, really important.
I think that's such a great point there, because the magical thing I feel you said is, how do you communicate that to your partner? Because if you don't communicate that to your partner, and all of a sudden there's a sexual drought, let's say in a relationship, and one of the partners doesn't know why, and it's not communicated, it would be abnormal to assume that I feel rejected. Maybe this person fell out of love, right? But it could be that they're experiencing some kind of emotional or hormonal issue or whatever.
Right.
And the communication is so important because, like you said, the expectation in the beginning part in that honeymoon stage of the relationship versus years down the road, those might be very, very different. And if not communicated, one's going to assume many things. I'm being rejected. This person's no longer in love with me and I'm not appreciated, whatever the thing is. And that's when we start projecting things, and nothing ever works out well when we start projecting.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understand from speaking to many people is that men tend to view sex as their form of intimacy, right? It is very important to connect in that way for men. They feel that as the way of intimacy, whereas women don't necessarily see that as intimacy. They see the communication, the touches, those sorts of things as being more intimate than just sex. And so I think that's where there's this big break off of where men feel like intimacy is gone to die if they're the ones who are being rejected. Women are like, what's going on? Where I still tell you I love you. I still give you attention But, I think there is that. And then a lot of times there's these like lack of communication where people are like, oh my God, I didn't see the divorce coming. And now my partner wants a divorce because they never even talked about it, but they built up this resentment over years and years. And they were just like, well, I'm feeling it, so you must be feeling it too. Like, why is this a shock to you?
It's so interesting you say that. I have this saying, I say it's like a fence. There's a fence and there's posts in the ground, and that fence is secure and nothing's going to knock it over. But over years, because of poor communication, or maybe I said something that offended you, but then you got over it, but I never really apologized, and I knew that it hurt you, but since you got over it, I'm like, I'm not going to apologize. It's fine. It was a little thing, but that little thing, all these little things, poor communication, financial issues that we don't talk about, a little comment that offended you or offended me, but then I get over it, so you don't acknowledge and apologize about it. They're knocking holes in that fence.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that fence is over time getting termite damage. And one day, just like one little thing is going to knock that fence right over. And you go, oh my gosh, I thought the fence was fine. Our job is to make sure our fence has no holes in it. And the moment, you see a hole coming, it's nothing wrong. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you weak. You're not a macho. Like, God, I lose all my macho status if I apologize. Just say, dude, I'm so sorry. I realize I just snapped at you about something because I'm experiencing work stress. And it's easy for me to say that at 50. It was probably different when I was younger.
Yeah.
But I wish someone older like me would have told me that, right? Because those little holes that we put in fences add up. And before you know it, the fence has no more integrity. And then just a slight little breeze and it falls over. When communication or a simple apology, when you realize you did say something to hurt someone's feelings, it's no big deal. It's fine. Yeah. You're still a man.
What advice do you have for people who are trying to attract the right mate? How do they attract the person that they want, right? Because they oftentimes, you may be attracting a certain kind of person, like the damsel in distress, and you feel like, well, what is this something I'm doing?
I think that the best thing that males or females can do is to heal and become the best version. Go from the 1.0 version to the 2.0 version. The 1.0 version of us is a human animal. And Joseph Campbell says that the best. He coined the term human animal in his book, The Power of Myth. And he says a human animal is impulsive, is needy, is emotional. A human animal is someone who is guided by reaction and not a respond. They react to things, right? And you can almost picture a dog, that's got its legs stuck in a trap and you're trying to save it, and you're constantly trying to help this thing, and it's reacting to you. And it's like, don't bite me, I'm trying to save you. Where a human being, a 2.0 version of yourself, your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions are not there making decisions. You're responding to a issue and not reacting to it. You are self-developed. On Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you've worked your way up to be able to stop and go, I wonder how she feels about this conversation that we were arguing over. Let me look at it through her lens, right? Great example I can give is many years ago when I had my personal training gyms. One of my gyms in San Marcos, California, one of my top personal trainers who worked for me, he had about 26 clients. And those were my clients, and he trained them, and he got paid for those. One day he put in his resignation, and hey, in 2 weeks, I'm out. Little did I know that he also told his clients, hey, I'm leaving, and I'll be working at this other gym across town. If you guys want to come there, I'd be happy to train you guys. And over there, I'll be paying rent. And so basically, this is the seed of me starting my own business. If any of you want to come. So of the 26 clients, like 20 of them went. Of course, when I found out, I sent him the most angry, all caps text message with multiple exclamation points. How dare you do this to me? You're taking food out of my kid's mouth. I feel so betrayed by you. His response was, these are my personal training clients, and I realize they belong to you and Premier Results, your company. But many of them said they were going to come with me anyway. And quite honestly, I wasn't trying to take food out of your kid's mouth. I wasn't trying to betray you. I just see you've got 5 gyms, and I'm just one of like 30 some odd personal trainers. I didn't even think about the negative impact, how it would have made you feel, right? How it made me feel. Mm-hmm. Because I looked at it through the lens of, he's backstabbing me, betraying me, you Judas, how dare you?
Yeah.
You're taking money and food out of my kid's mouth. He looked at it as, man, I'm just a trainer who's starting out, and now I'm going to start paying rent. That's kind of scary. So if it can start with 15 or 20 clients who already were in love with me anyway, somewhere there, both of us could have been a 2.0 version of ourselves. And he could have come to me and said, hey, look, here's my resignation. Oh, by the way, do you mind if I ask these clients to come with me? Because they're going to want to come with me when I tell them I'm leaving anyway. And I would love to give you X percentage of the money that they give me for 4 months after they leave? I might have said yes. He didn't have that conversation with me. I took it as a personal attack and rejection, and how dare he. And so, this battle ensued. And so much of being a better version of ourselves, healing, going from 1.0 to 2.0. Again, how did I show up to people when business partners, relationships, intimate relationships, when the unhealed version of me who didn't trust, because my first sexual experience was 2 older boys that molested me, and the trust that I had in them, as Kevin, my therapist, described, is like, young boys look up to older boys as a rite of passage into manhood. And those boys violated something very sacred, Bedros. I was like, oh shit, I never even looked at it that way. Mm-hmm. I looked at it as, what did I do to make them do that to me? Like, what's wrong with me, right? When in reality, like, every young boy has this desire to be like the older boys.
Right.
They took advantage of that, a very sacred thing. So, but the version of me that when I was unhealed would show up as, I can't trust you. I always felt like I'm not good enough, so maybe they're cheating on me. And then, of course, we subconsciously find evidence for that by then getting with people who you can't trust, and who are broken and who will cheat on you. And then going, see, I was right. You can't trust them. They do cheat on you. You are unworthy. As I started to heal, my standards for the type of person I was looking for went up. And so I think the greatest way we can attract the right person is to heal through all your shit, the physical, mental, if there was sexual abuse, heal with it, become the better person, heal financially, heal emotionally, like whatever relationship issues you have with your parents and your siblings, heal through that. It is work. 15 months of working with a therapist. Let me tell you, I would leave Kevin's office sometimes and I felt like I was walking through molasses with my head in like the storm cloud. Mm-hmm. And it would be like that for days because it was just a heavy conversation that we had for an hour. But I realized that was the work that I had to do to become the better version of myself, to attract the person that I needed in my life, right? And so we don't do that enough. And so we go, aha, she seems to like me. I think this is good enough. And then there's no conversations of values, standards, expectations. And then before you know it, we're knocking holes in fences.
Are you feeling in a rut in the bedroom, wishing you had the kind of sex life you could brag about? I've spent years helping patients and creating content for people all around the world to improve and optimize their sex life. Today, you can get my knowledge for 100% free with my new ebook called Better Sex, Better Life. In this ebook, I review my top 10 tips for improving your sex life, all from the comfort of your own home. All you have to do is go to renamalikmd.com/morepleasure to download it for free today. I like to tell my sons, and I like to tell people in general, like, you're worth it. Like, you really are deserving of a good person who loves you and cares for you. And it's worth waiting for. It's worth finding that person. And it's hard, especially when you're younger, right? There's a lot of hormones, there's a lot of desire. But I think anyone who is raising sons, I think it's important to teach your sons that they have value and that they don't need to just bend the knee to the first person that likes them, right? And I think that that's so, so important.
Isn't it funny that we'll see the value in those young men, but until they see the value in them through healing themselves, sadly, they do end up taking the first opportunity that comes their way, feeling like this. And I believe it's all subconscious, probably subconsciously feeling like, probably can't get anything better than this person. Mm-hmm. When in reality, if you just become the better version of yourself, you will naturally attract the better person. But again, it takes work.
In terms of, once you're in a relationship and you're a busy entrepreneur or you're busy at work, it becomes very difficult to prioritize being intimate with your partner or prioritize giving them the time they need. How did you navigate that personally, and do you have advice for people?
Well, the one thing I would do is I would say, just from my own personal experience, if you think it's a good idea to bring your spouse into a business partnership, it's probably not going to be. And that's because if you and I are business partners and we have a disagreement on how we're going to set up the studio, at night when I go home, I don't come home to you. Like, we're just business partners and that's it.
Yeah.
But if you are business partners with your spouse, and not to say it can't work, because it does work, but each of you need your own lane. And this is the thing that I preach the most. Like, hey, maybe the studio is in your lane if we're a couple, and the marketing, like everything internal is in your lane and everything external is in my lane, right? Mm-hmm. And if we can delineate that, we're going to have a better time working together. And then also, I just had a coaching client reach out to me and says, Bedros, I'm all about structuring my time. I'm all about doing the things that move the money needle and the meaning needle. So I always talk about money and meaning. Says, however, my fiance is demanding more time of me. And my fiance does not understand why I have these big lofty dreams and these big ambitions. And she says, we could just keep living in this nice apartment that we have out here in Tampa. And what do you say to that? I was like, well, you're probably more tolerant to that now. You're going to be less tolerant to that down the road because you have dreams, goals, ambitions, and those are not going to be met. And soon you're going to have to take it out on her, and that's not fair to her. So if she can't get on the same page, you guys might as well part ways now. I think it's important to have those conversations and expectations, and whether it's going to be a date once a month, a date night once a month, or once a week, or 10 times a week. Again, going back to what we talked about, conversations and expectations. Are we going to work together in business? If so, are we both going to decide how marketing dollars and sales processes are going to be created? Because we probably have two different, I have a higher risk tolerance than you might, right? Or vice versa. Or do you have your own lane? I have my own lane. And then we have a rule set in place where when we come home, we're not talking about work. Now we're husband and wife again and not business partners, right?
Yeah.
And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, conversations, expectations, so that you're not just carrying work stress into your home, which then can erode everything in your home life, which then makes you wonder, was it all worth it in the first place?
So we've been talking a lot about what makes a good man. What does it mean to you for someone to be masculine?
Probably the best words I can share are these two words, a savage and a servant. That to me is a masculine man. A savage, and I don't just mean, violent with a desire to protect you from harm. That is mandatory. But also savage in his work, a savage in how he keeps himself mentally and emotionally sharp and dialed in. Savage in the way he loves. My friend John, Warrior Poet Society, John Lovell, he says a man should be a lion and a lamb. A lion in your work, a lion in your fitness, a lion in your mindset. But when you come home, it's okay to also be a lamb, to show your underbelly and, hey, it's okay to love me up. And so when we're a savage, when we can be a savage in protecting our family and our health and fitness and making money, just savagely going out there and doing it, getting after it, but then be a servant to our spouse, to our kids, to our neighbors, to our parents, to a friend. To me, that feels good. I don't want to just be around hey, you can call on me when you need protection or when you need someone to move your furniture because I'm big and strong. If you just need someone to hear you out and hold you and cry with you, you can call on me. Yeah. I'll be that servant. And I think that's what makes a masculine man, because if we don't have that lamb in us and it's all lion, it's a little too rough and tumble. If we don't have that servant in us, because throughout everyday life, the servant is needed more than the savage. Mm-hmm. It's good to have the savage. If we heard a very loud bang and explosion right now, God forbid, I would count on the men in this building to go out there and check things out. And God forbid it was something bad, we would have to do some savage things to make sure we're all safe and protected. But we need servant more than savage, but it's good to have the savage within. And I think also that creates a beautiful attraction to the opposite sex, because I think instinctively, in fact, one time when I lived in San Diego, I took myself on a solo date to the San Diego Wild Animal Park. Mm-hmm. And they had a gazelle. You know how all the animals that aren't going to kill each other are mingling together, right? So it looks more like the Serengeti. And they had this gazelle, but it had one of the horns were broken, 4 inches of the horn, so long horns, but one of them was broken, and he was by himself, in a cage, well taken care of by himself. I'm like, hey, how come that one's by himself? Any other injuries other than that? No, just that. But the female gazelles don't want to mate with him. They instinctively know he's no longer savage.
Something's broken.
Something's broken.
Yeah.
And so I think a good part of attraction to a woman is when a man has claws and fangs. He's savage, but his servant heart and mind can control the savage until it's necessary.
And I think there's also something, I say this to my husband all the time, I love that I'm your favorite person because you don't have a lot of people that you like.
Right.
And that you chose me. And it makes me feel like I have this special part of you that's just for me and our family.
Well said.
And I think that that's really attractive to a female.
Yeah, that's very true. Because once we're tight with other men, we'll joke around with them and cut each other down. And just recently, I had an event. There was a whole bunch of men at it and 2 women. was a very physical experience. And myself and all the other instructors were yucking it up and being guys, picking on each other and making guy jokes to each other. And then one of the male participants in the event cracked actually a very funny man joke. And Nina was there helping out. And every one of us instructors turned to him like, hey, shut up, get back to work, start lifting those weights because you're not in our circle yet. You're not accepted yet. That's just a way of men. Like these guys I've worked with, I've lifted with, I've suffered with, you're not in yet. You can hear our jokes, but you can't bring one of your jokes in yet. There is something very special about that, right? Like once we give him that right, or once, if I go somewhere and there's a group of men, I'm not just going to step in and start cracking jokes. I'm smart enough to know I'm going to hang out in the shadows until they've accepted me. And I'm going to work. I'm going to earn my right to be in that group of men. Hopefully they're formidable men. And then once they start busting my balls, then I can start busting balls. That means I've been accepted.
Right.
And just like that, also, it's like that with when a man chooses a woman, hey, you can pick at me in ways that I would never let anyone else, pick the wax out of my ear or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a very special thing that a man is allowing to happen because most everyone else will get the knuckle sandwich.
Do you think it's important for men to be vulnerable?
I do believe so. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing. And I say it about sex. I talk about sex a lot, but I think you can't have great sex unless you're truly vulnerable. And I think that's the same for relationships and in many things. You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable, which is super scary.
Yeah. It is very scary for men because we'll say something that's vulnerable and then we almost like look at you like, do you think less of me now? Do you think I'm weaker? Because a man will always choose to be respected over loved. If you asked a man, do you want a woman's respect or love? He's going to say, I want both. I want both. Bedros Keuilian, want both. But if you're like, Bedros, you could only have one, I would want the respect. And most men, because I did a survey of 34,000 men on my email list of just specifically men, 80 some odd % said, I'll take the respect over love. And that is a very special thing. With that comes vulnerability. So if a man is going to be vulnerable with you, then he's going to look at you like, did I just lose your respect by shedding a tear and crying or talking about what happened to me as a child? Do you look at me softer now? Have you lost respect for me? You may not lose love. There's a chance that you might lose respect for me, and a man doesn't know how to handle that. Yeah. And when we have the right woman in our life and they're like, no, actually, I'm actually deeper in love with you. Thanks for sharing that with me. Holy shit. Like now I'll go conquer the world for you as a man. Yeah.
Right. I think that's another really good red flag that we didn't mention is respect, is that your partner should respect you. Yeah. And that should come through pretty easily. I think sometimes you may not notice the disrespect if you're not looking for it. But there's times where your partner may show you that they don't respect you. They love you, but they don't necessarily respect you. And that's the first break in that fence.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. At the project, that men's personal development experience that I run, when I share that with men, and they go, well, what's a good sign to know that if my woman loves me but has lost respect for me? I go, when she starts treating you like her son and not like her man anymore. When she tells you to take out the garbage, when she tells you to do this, like you would tell a 10, 12, 13-year-old boy to do. And that's because you failed to do your part as a man. You failed to show up in a way that commands respect. Therefore, she has lost respect, and therefore she'll now treat you. Because a woman, I think, inherently wants to nurture a man and, nurture his soft side, his inner child, right? But if that's all parts you're unresponsible, you're not doing your part, now she has to tell you what to do, like take out, she's treating you like her boy. You're no longer her man, and she's lost respect. She loves you, but she won't respect you. And they're like, oh my God, that happens to me. I go, great, let's fix it.
Yeah.
And it is something that can be fixed.
It can be,
yeah.
Absolutely.
But he has to earn that. And then if she still can't give it, then it's a different conversation.
You talked about sons. What advice do you have for parents, fathers? How can you be the best father, especially to sons, I think, to lead an example as a man? What is your advice for them?
Every father owes it to his son to raise him as a man. And I'll explain why. There's a great book out there called Raising a Modern Day Knight. I read that book when Andrew, my son, was born. He was a little puppy when I read it. And in that book, I realized that men need a rite of passage. Mm-hmm. all throughout history. The Aborigines, as the young boy would turn 12, 13 years old, in their culture, the dad would find other men that he trusts in the tribe. They'd wear these demonic masks, and the wife was in on it, and they would come inside the house, and they would kidnap the boy from the mom, and the mom would put up a fight, like, no, don't take my boy, don't take my boy. And the dad, who's got this mask on, along with a handful of other men, they're yanking the boy away, and finally mom lets go on purpose, and they take the boy out there, and they start beating him up, and they start letting up a little bit so that the boy can fight back. And of course, once the boy fights back, the dad takes off his mask, exposing his face, and then puts it on the boy, says, you have now won a seat at the table for us to groom you as a man of this tribe. And that's just one experience. There's literally, there was another tribe, I forget, in New Guinea, that would take a young man, again, the fathers, when the boy was 12, 13, 14 years old, as the sun was going down to the edge of the forest, dad would take his knife, he'd cut a little bit of flesh on that boy, make him bleed, hand him the knife, say, go into that forest and go defend yourself, and come out in the morning when the sun is out. Myself and the other men who I trust will be right here waiting for you. The blood is obviously to lure other animals, and he has to now defend himself and find shelter throughout the night and come out. And when he comes out, dad says, congratulations, that was a rite of passage. You have now won a seat. Not you're a man. You have won a seat at the table for us to start grooming you as a man of this tribe, and no longer as a boy, right? You're no longer part of the women and children. You're now part of the men. That's what that book shared with me. And it said to create a rite of passage. And the conclusion that I came to was, oh my gosh, well, why don't they have that for women, a rite of passage? Oh, there is one. When a young lady, when my daughter Chloe got her period, her boobs start to grow and a very physical thing happens. She feels pain and a very physical, scary thing happens. I'm bleeding. Mom says, honey, you are now a woman.
Right.
You blossomed into a woman. This is it. There's no event like that happens to a young man to go, aha, I am now a man. I have now won the seat. So fathers have to create that rite of passage. This is why knights had squires, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it was a knight's job to groom that young man, that squire, into a knight, into a savage servant, a gentleman, a chivalrous knight. And it was that squire's job to clean the horse and the armor and sharpen the blade, etc. And so it is a dad's job to teach a man, a young boy, the way of men, which essentially, from Jack Donovan's book, The Way of Men, strength, that's mental, emotional, and physical strength, honor, as in, hey, we all have each other's back. You're not going to betray me as a fellow man of this tribe and sell me out. Honor, right, which is respect and loyalty. Strength, honor, mastery. Maybe you don't have the strength. Can you at least make a club, a trap, a bow and arrow, mastery of something? Make shelter for us. Strength, honor, mastery, and courage. If the poop were to hit the fan, look, man, we've got the strength. We trust each other. You've got the ability to make bows. And this group of us have the courage to go into battle. That is what other men are instinctively looking for in other men. That is what all men are looking for other men. And it is a dad's duty and responsibility to groom that young man through that post, as that young man's growing up. I remember we traveled as a family when my kids were smaller, and me and Andrew, and the ladies would go to the restroom. Me and Andrew, we're waiting. I go, son, we wait with our back against the wall in the airport, everywhere. He goes, why? I go, now we don't have to worry about 360 degrees. We only worry about 180 degrees. Oh, got it, Dad. Till this day, he's 19 years old, does jujitsu, plays music, savage and a servant. Beautiful, athletic young man, well-spoken, could be violent as heck, and very self-aware. And so if we don't teach our young men or young boys to become men, as dads, we have failed a young woman in the future, because he's going to become somebody's husband.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to become somebody's father. And now that young boy that you allowed to become an adult, but still maintain his boyish ignorance, is a liability to that woman and to those children. And I don't believe there's room for that. And that's how we almost lost this country in recent times.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important, whether it's a son or a daughter, but to raise them with the right values, because they are going to be someone else's parent, hopefully someday,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, you're either raising a
partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're either raising a liability or raising an asset.
Yeah.
And they carry your last name, for crying out loud, son or daughter. When my daughter plays flag football, and when people I see number 3 and Keuilian on the back, my last name, I'm in the bleachers yelling and cheering, and I never played sports.
Mm-hmm.
To see my daughter playing flag football and just, being the number 1 scorer on the team just makes me so proud. She's got my last name. She's She's got a little boyfriend named Nolan, and Nolan didn't know how to open doors. And so she did exactly what dad taught her when she was 7. She went and stood by the door. When Nolan's mom came to pick them up, she just stood by the door and waited, the car door. Nolan rolled down the window and said, "Aren't you coming in?" She goes, "No, can you come around and open the door for me?" And that started because Chloe and I started taking Chloe out on dates when she was 7 years old on a weekly date. And I explained to her what a man's responsibility is. And I said, "Listen, Chloe, you're only 7 years old, but when you have a friend who's a boy, these are the expectations you have of him. You know how Daddy and Andrew open your door for you? Yeah. Once you're in the car safe, then we go to our side of the car. Yeah. That's what your friends who are boys should do." I didn't say boyfriend or a future husband. She's young. She just can't process that.
Right.
He's a boy. He's a friend. That's his responsibility. And she has those expectations now. And in fact, when Nolan came into our life a year ago, she said, "Hey, Dad, can you take Nolan to the gym and work out?" "Sure, Nolan. Good to meet you. Do you want to go tomorrow?" "Sure." So we went, and Nolan had never worked out in a gym, and he threw up and almost passed out. Thankfully, he just threw up, and I laid him out on the turf, and he was fine. And I took a picture for Chloe and sent it to Chloe. I said, "But he's a really awesome young man, but man, I don't feel like he can protect you if something happens at school, Chloe." Here we are a year later. Chloe sent me a picture of Nolan and her working out together. They're both flexing their triceps. The kid is jacked. She goes, "Dad, it was that one workout that you did with him a year ago."
Yeah.
In other words, "Dad, can you take him and test him for me?" Because those were the expectations that I had set. And so she didn't trust Andrew to test him because Andrew goes, "I can take him and test him." Chloe, she goes, "No, I don't trust you. You're going to put him on the mats and probably choke him out."
Yeah.
Dad's just going to train with him. These are the things that men need to do for their daughters and their sons. So my daughter can have the and my daughter's a savage. I'm trying to get her in jiu-jitsu right now. It's been hard and pulling teeth, but at least she works out. She's athletic, and I'm sure she'll get into jiu-jitsu soon. But in the meantime, if we don't teach them, then they become a liability to this country, to the communities that they are in. And I don't want that. I don't want to breed liabilities. I want to breed assets.
With the little end of our podcast, I want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship.
Sure.
What do you think the biggest mistakes are that entrepreneurs make?
The number one mistake that new entrepreneurs make is they overestimate what they can achieve in 1 year, and they underestimate what they can achieve in 5 years, because they draw out some wacky little business plan on the back of a napkin and they go, "I'm going to market, and I've got such a great product. When I market, everyone's going to buy it. And when they buy it, I'm going to scale the business. I have this many employees, this many dollars. And then by the end of the year, I'll be rich, filthy rich," not realizing that there's a competitor doing exactly what they're doing, or they posted something that social media didn't like. Now they're banned or shadow banned. They ran an ad campaign that didn't get approved. And now each ad campaign they keep trying to run doesn't get approved, or they hired someone and that person embezzled money, or they hired someone and they didn't deliver on the promise. And so they think that it's going to be smooth sailing and not realizing how many challenges there are. And then they underestimate that in that first year or two, the first 24 months, you're going to get so many battle scars that the next 3 years is the hockey stick year.
Yeah.
And so if you just stay in the fight long enough, this is why I say they overestimate what they achieve in a year. They underestimate what they achieve in 5 years, because you get 2 years of your ass handed to you. Your next year, number 3, 4, and 5, you're like, "I can smell a loser when I see them, and I'm not going to hire this person. I'm going to hire this person instead." And all of a sudden you have this sixth sense about you. You have your gut is dialed in, and you're now hockey sticking, because when your ads get disapproved, you know that's part of the game. When the competitors start bad mouthing you, and they will, it's part of the game. That is a price we pay for success. And so you have to get those battle scars. Without the battle scars, you can't, which is why it takes 5 to 10 years to really scale a business to like a formidable multiple, 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure thing. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is poor leadership. None of us were born a leader. Maybe Jocko Willink was born a leader. Everyone else, it's not factory installed in us to be a leader, because we don't want to really tell people what to do. And then we have a hard time communicating our needs and wants because we don't want to seem pushy. And so we're passive aggressive about it. And we don't want to seem pushy. So we don't set a deadline and we go, "I just need this as soon as possible." But as soon as possible to you might be 4 months from now. As soon as possible to me is 4 weeks from now. So now I'm passive aggressive with you. And you're like, "Why is B being a jerk to me?" Well, because my expectations weren't met, but I never truly were clear in my expectations. Right. And so leadership is a byproduct of clear communication, crafting a vision. Like, what is the vision of this organization? What are we going to do? And when are we going to do it by? like what the goal is and when we're going to achieve it. And what are the KPIs, key performance indicators? Like, how do we know we're winning every day, right? We break that elephant down into bite-sized pieces when we eat it. And then is everybody on board? Do they have the get it, want it, and the GWC factor? Do they get their position? Do they want that role and responsibility? And do they have the capacity to perform it? If not, I know you didn't become an entrepreneur. I don't know any entrepreneur that said, I can't wait to start a business and become the boss so I can fire someone. But every single one of us, right? You're an entrepreneur.
Yep.
I don't think you said that. You said, we're all going to work together. We're all going to be happy. We're all going to grow together. And then someone's a dipshit. They don't do their job right, or they screw something up. And now you're like, shoot, I got to fire them. So the third thing is, on top of bad leadership, is we keep bad employees too long.
Absolutely.
The reason that's a bad thing is because now you're sending a message to your good employees that I am okay with mediocre standards. And so the moment you show the rest of your badass employees that you're okay with mediocre standards by keeping someone who's limping along in your business, now the entire standard falls, and now you start building resentment towards your entire team. But it was your decision to make. And of course, if there's a fourth thing, it would be lack of sales. Everyone thinks that my mousetrap is better than everyone else's, so I will build it and they will come. And then you build a better mousetrap and they don't come. So build a better mousetrap and then sell the crap out of it. Like, learn how to sell, influence, persuade, overcome objections, build urgency, ask for the money. Because if you've got a product that solves my life's problems, you deserve my money in exchange for that solution in my life. And if we could do those four things and understand it won't happen in a year, you might do well in entrepreneurship.
That's great advice. I mean, literally, that's like everything you need to know right there. Is there something that you wish you did differently during this journey, particularly on the entrepreneurial side?
Yes, I should have taken bigger risks sooner. I played it too safe. And I think that's normal. But in hindsight, looking back, I'm 50 and looking back at the 30 some odd year old version of myself, I could remember times where I should have scaled faster, hired more people, delegated sooner. I was like, I can't let this accountant have access to my bank account. Like, what if they take my money? So I was still signing checks. I was still doing payroll. I was doing things that should not have been on my plate to do. And because of those things, I didn't take those risks. I retarded my business in the process early on. Yeah.
So we end our podcast with some questions we ask everybody. They can be and really about any topic. What's something that you know now in life? And we've talked a lot about this today, but it could be something new, something you know now that you wish you knew earlier.
Something I know now that I wish I knew earlier is that this too will pass. No matter what happens, a failure, a setback, something embarrassing, this too will pass, because most everyone else is looking at what's going on in their life anyway. They're not looking into your life and going, oh my gosh, look at her, she's failed. And so take the risks. You will fail. And when you do, it will pass.
You're the star of your own life, but no one's looking at you.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. What's a non-negotiable, something you have to do every day?
I have to get my workouts in every single day. Ideally 2, but at least like 1 intense workout every single day. And it's more mental than anything. In fact, I'm 8 weeks or 7 weeks out from a double hernia surgery. And the first 3 weeks where I wasn't supposed to work out till like 5 or 6 weeks to recover. You're a doctor, you know this stuff. 3 days after the surgery, double hernia, inguinal surgery, I was in the gym. Like, I just needed to even just smell sweaty people. I just needed to be there for mental sanity, right?
Sure.
And so like, it was pathetic what I was doing. But it's non-negotiable for me. It's just as important for my mental health as it is for my physical health.
What is a life hack that you would share with people?
Wake up at the same time and go to sleep at the same time 7 days a week, so that you don't screw up your circadian rhythm. Some of the most disciplined entrepreneurs I know will wake up at 5 a.m. 5 days a week, and then on the weekends, they'll allow themselves to sleep in. And then on Monday, their circadian rhythm is all messed up. The most busiest and overwhelming day for an entrepreneur is a Monday. Yeah. And now they wake up discombobulated because they chose to sleep in on the weekends and party hard on the weekends. Like, I am as structured on the weekends where my sleep is concerned as I am during the weekdays.
Yeah.
Major life hack.
It's really good for your overall health, for sleep hygiene. And I mean, sleep is so underutilized.
Sleep hygiene, I like that.
Yeah. It's something us doctors use, but it's really important, because if you're not getting your good sleep, it has tremendous effects on your health, right? It's not just that you feel like crap. It's that you literally are having hormonal changes, physiologic changes that are actually causing you to either think less clearly, have more brain fog, maybe move less efficiently if you have a job that requires, sort of accuracy. And so that's really scary.
Yeah, good point.
Lastly, if you couldn't be an entrepreneur or a personal trainer, what would you do?
I would either be a comedian or a bartender at a very busy high-end resort hotel, like the lobby bar,
Okay.
like the main lobby bar.
Because you'd be able to talk to so many different people?
Yeah, and I'd still crack jokes the whole time
Yeah.
while making them laugh and making them booze. Ironically, I don't drink now, but
I mean, either.
I'll still poison other people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you guys so much for joining us on today's episode of the Rena Malik MD podcast. If you like this episode, make sure to take a screenshot and share it on your social media. Let me know what you liked and what you want to see more of. And as always, remember to take care of yourself because you're worth it.